following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with my co-host Dan Rylance, and very pleased to welcome back an old friend, not so old chronologically, but old in that you've been here many times. City Manager Mark Rohloff is here joining us tonight, and we're going to talk about the tax bills that we've all been regaled with in our mailboxes recently, and you know, just kind of a recap of the city budget and how they came to arrive at the numbers that they did. Kind of taking a look back at the year in general for the city and what's ahead for the coming year. So welcome, Mark. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it very much.
Hi. Great to be here.
So let's talk about those tax bills. It actually, you know, in comparison to what the school district did, it was pretty good. You know, if you can call a tax increase pretty good. So how did you guys arrive at, you know, recap it for us. You know, what did the amount of taxes go up to from a levy standpoint, and how did you arrive at that?
Sure.
figure?
Well, thank you for pointing out the many different governmental entities are part of that pie, of the tax pie, but we're the ones that send out the holiday greeting cards, so we're normally the ones who get the holiday greetings back when people talk about their tax bill. This year, our tax rate went up about 21 cents. We originally had talked about a 25-cent increase, which was about 2.9%. It's slightly less than 2.9 now. The council, after they got the budget, they talked about some different things, and they made some changes with respect to non-represented employees' wages and postponed any type of wage adjustment in 2011 for those folks, and that saved about $130,000. So that was taken off from the original budget that was presented to council. So the tax rate for city purposes only is $8.61. Last year was about $8.40, so about 21-cent increase. So if you have a $100,000 house, your tax bill went up about $21 from the city.
Okay. Any cuts that we saw from a personnel standpoint or a service standpoint?
We did have a couple reductions in staffing, and those were things that over the course of the year we just identified as vacancies occurred, we reevaluated them. We didn't make any specific cuts to existing positions that were currently being filled, but there was one in finance and a couple in public works. We're anticipating that as we look forward that we may be able to achieve some savings if we automate refuse, so we're holding off on filling those positions, so there was no need to budget for them, so we just took those off the top.
Okay. You know, when we talk about represented employees, which is union employees, or non-represented employees, I don't know, it kind of strikes me, if I were a non-represented employee, I think I'd have a little heartache and a little heartburn with, you know, other people whose wages and benefits or benefits are going up just slightly, and we're sort of being locked in. You know, have you heard anything from employees? Are they upset about that? Or
I think you characterize it well in terms of, you know, if you were one of those employees, how would you feel? You know, these are the non-represented employees represent a very small portion of the city. most people think of them as just managers, and the 13 department heads are sort of the top of that group, but all the support staff that work directly for them, so every administrative assistant we have in the city that works for a department head is also a non-represented employee. And then there are a variety of people in between there as well, a lot of supervisory staff. And I love the department heads, but the supervisors are really the key people, because they're the ones in the trenches actually directing work, and those people were affected as well. And when they do such an outstanding job, and when there are emergencies, they're the ones that are out there directing the traffic and making sure good things are happening. And those folks, certainly were discouraged by that. I try to understand where the council was on that. I have a balancing act. I have to do things fiscally responsible. The council certainly wanted that, but at the same time, I'm also there to motivate employees to do the absolute best job they can. And that's tough when you say you've done a great job and there's going to be no increase. In fact, we're going to take a little more from health insurance next year. So that has been tough. But I try to look at this on a very long-term basis, and this is a short-term correction. And better days lie ahead. I think most people believe that better days lie ahead, and it's been tough from as any organization that's had to deal with this, public or private. Anytime you deal with those things, it's tough. But I believe that we have some very dedicated public employees, and while they may not like it, I think they understand the reasons for it. But it makes it's human nature, and you got to understand that when that happens.
Yeah. This is being taped on Thursday, December 17th. So my 16th. I'm sorry. My reference is on Tuesday, the 15th, or was it the 14th?
14th.
14th. I'm off a day. Okay. All right.
I'll bring a calendar
All right.
next
The
time.
Common Council gave you your first raise since beginning to be city manager. You got your 2% raise, and they did this on the basis of an evaluation process that seems to change with every deputy mayor. I don't quite understand that debate, but I watched a little bit. Now I'm going to give you a rare opportunity that you probably will never be given again on Oshkosh. For the first time, we're going to give you the opportunity to evaluate members of the Common Council. So my first question is,
oh boy,
who do you rate as the best performing council member for the past year?
Oh, that's like asking me which is my favorite child, and I just ethically I can't do that, but I can tell you that whenever you have a diverse council, you're going to have differing viewpoints, and the council members who voted against giving me a raise still said that they felt I was doing a good job, which was very encouraging. They have philosophical reasons why they didn't want to do the raise. So, I don't want to sound like a politician for dodging it, but if you would ask me who my favorite son was, I'd make 3 angry and 1 happy, and I would never answer that question.
I knew you were going to say that, so I have a follow-up question. Okay?
I'm sucked into your lair, Dan.
Which council member sends you the most emails, and which council member sends you the least emails?
Ooh, that's a factual statement. I got to figure that out. Well, there's so many different technologies nowadays. You almost have to throw in text messages and things like that.
Yeah. But there's got to be some up there and some that are down, right?
Yeah, but it's not as widespread as you might think. I mean, I really have to give that some thought to count it up. The mayor loves to do text messaging. So I get a lot of texts from the mayor. I can probably tell you that I don't get many texts from other council members, but again, I get phone calls. I understand. But I would say probably the mayor, just because
of who he is.
The mayor's the mayor, and people look to the mayor for a lot of that. So probably the mayor. After that, it's tough. Some of the council members, and I don't want to insult anybody because age has a lot to do with your use of technology. Some council members who just don't embrace technology will call or stop by. If you're retired, you'll stop by more than you'll do that. When Councilor McHugh was on the council, he stopped by quite a bit. He came by all the time and would chat.
I understand.
So, gosh, second, it would probably be Councilor Peschel, I would guess, but it's really close because Councilor King will get in touch with me, and Herman and Cummings. stop by. But they're both retired, semi-retired, so
a different lifestyle for their.
Yeah, so everybody's. It depends on their lifestyle and their how they embrace technology.
Okay.
But probably the mayor the most.
Okay, I have one more. On the upcoming mayor's race, Vegas has some odds, and I just want to ask you: will the council members run longer with which candidate if he wins?
What's that? I guess
we have two candidates running for mayor.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
Yeah, Vegas,
so far.
So far, yeah, but they'll probably only be two. You know, will the council meetings run longer with what candidate if he's picked?
You know, I don't think the mayor necessarily dictates the length of the council meeting.
Okay.
So again, I got to dodge your question because that's, you know, the council meetings are dictated by the council.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask me because the length of the council meetings here are longer than other places. This is still not the place where I've had the longest council meetings.
Really?
Oh yeah. So I've seen a lot of and councils. They ebb and flow in terms of how long their meetings are.
Okay.
And I was at one city where the council meetings ended, on average, they ended at midnight.
Yeah.
And this was when I lived on the West Coast, and I would get home so late I would call my father in Cleveland, Ohio, because my wife was sleeping. I didn't want to wake her up to just debrief myself after. So I would call my dad. It would be 4 in the morning, and my dad was having his morning coffee. So the council meetings really are a function of a lot of the issues, and you know, any council member has liberties to say as much or as little as he or she wants. So it's not necessarily the mayor. So it's how did I dodge that? Did I dodge that one pretty good?
You did. I don't. I honestly think that it will run longer if one person wins, but that's just my editorial, and you don't have to come. All right, the prosecution rests. You can, but that was fun. I just wanted to switch it.
The beads of my...
No, not at all. No.
Well, but I have a question about the text messaging. Now, you know, do text messages also fall under the Open Records Act?
I would suspect that they do.
Okay, all right.
But normally there are you know, so-and-so called. Text messaging doesn't get into a lot of...
Yeah, you can't make them too long, but I was just kind of curious because some people, you know, kids today, they have entire conversations through texting, and it can just go on and on and on, even though you can only type in a little bit at a time. I mean, you can have full conversations.
Nah, usually it's can you call so-and-so.
Not with kids.
No, they'll write entire books.
That's what I'm saying. They can have entire conversations. So anyway, okay, good. Well, did you have anything else on the budget or related to the budget?
Nope.
Before we move on from there?
I don't.
Well, you know, I want to talk about one thing because I'm really pleased with it, and several council members took note of it during the budget, and it's actually in the capital improvements program. One of our strategic goals in our strategic plan is to help strengthen neighborhoods. And one of the things that NeighborWorks, the group that we contracted with from Racine, was absolutely insistent on was that we needed to have a pool of money to be able to make an impact in neighborhoods. We categorize it as public improvements, but it's not necessarily public improvements, but it's $250,000 to allow the groups that ultimately organize as neighborhood groups to decide on things that they want to do to have an impact in the neighborhood. And I can't even tell you what those are yet. I simply categorize them as public improvements, but I don't even think they're going to be public improvements. They could be dumpster days. They could be, we need to buy this house and rehab it. But NeighborWorks wants to engage the neighborhoods in helping. What priorities do you have for this neighborhood? And so it's something we've never done before, and I think it's really a totally different approach to how we've been doing things in the neighborhood. So I'm really pleased and proud of that, even though I don't have any results to tell you about. But the fact that we're going to let the neighborhoods prioritize that, I think is going to be a huge change in philosophy as we move to the future in addressing our neighborhood issues. Well,
while we're on the subject of that, you know, is there going to be any kind of, since we are developing this close relationship with NeighborWorks, do you anticipate, Mark, any kind of a future ordinance change coming forth that requires people to not use green or untreated lumber on their properties? And the reason I ask that is twofold. Number one, several years ago, there was a movement, and I think that predates you, but there was a movement by someone in the Planning Services Department who is no longer here, Susan Keplinger, to you know, kind of push for that in a specific neighborhood. You know, there were certain kinds of things that she wanted on homes that were of an architectural, historic nature. And then we heard about this in the Near East neighborhood also, and I think that was also under Susan Keplinger. And I most recently had on someone from Neighborhood Watch, and he was very focused too on this untreated lumber. Yeah, everybody may not like the way untreated lumber looks, but I am not convinced in the least that untreated lumber is going to serve as a magnet to pull crime into a neighborhood. And I would rather see someone fix up their home using whatever they can afford than not fix it up at all. And so I asked the question because I think that would be a pretty controversial issue in the city if that were to come forward.
Yeah, I think it's going to remain a controversial issue. You know, staff was pushing forth something that was adopted by the council, but I don't think council had a full appreciation for it. And when people started to realize it, there was pushback from the public. And part of it is the neighborhood's got to decide as a group. And some people believe the neighborhood did decide, other people didn't, so that was a problem. Part of NeighborWorks is we're going to bring you together and you're going to decide as a group how you want the neighborhood to look. But it's really more of an issue with, do we use sticks or do we use carrots to encourage people to do these types of things? And that goes back to that $250,000 investment that we're putting in our capital improvement plan. Our new community development director, Alan Davis, feels very strongly, and I'm supporting him on this, is that we need to provide incentives for people to want to do that. You know, if we say, you know, you want to fix up your house, if we provide you with this incentive, would you use something other than green treated lumber? And they have to evaluate, wow, if I get this, I can maybe do something differently, a little more historically significant. Is there a value to me doing that? And give the opportunity for the resident to weigh that that option, that incentive, the carrot dangling in front of them. And if they do that, then we can get those improvements. But if somebody says, you know, all I got is this and I just can't afford any more than this, and they take pride in their house and they do a good job, can neighborhoods be successful and clean and safe with green treated lumber? I think the answer is yes. But can we raise the tide for all ships if we throw a few incentives here and there? I think that's the real key, and NeighborWorks totally agrees with that philosophy. So Alan Davis, our community development director of NeighborWorks, really saw eye to eye on that. More carrots, fewer sticks, and then get it going that way. So I'm hoping that that's going to take off.
So it would be an optional sort of thing rather than a mandate that you cannot do this and you must do A, B, or C.
Yeah, and a lot of it's going to be education. People, you know, do you know what your house could look like? And if we do education, people say, well, yeah, but it's going to cost me this much more. Well, did you know that we have a grant that will pay half of that extra cost? And then they'll scratch their head and give it a thought. But if they take that much pride where they really think about it, you will get more investment, not just financial investment, but emotional investment. And that's the NeighborWorks philosophy, is get people emotionally engaged in their neighborhood, in addition to being financially engaged.
Okay.
Can I follow up on this?
Yeah, and I hope it's going to be about the TIF money.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Many states, I think there's a lack of incentive for a person in an older neighborhood in Oshkosh to make improvements on his house because his property tax bill goes up right away. Are you familiar with some of these states where you put a 5-year moratorium on major improvements and there's no increase on your tax for those 5 years?
Kind of like a TIF.
Yeah, tax abatement is illegal in Wisconsin. So those types of programs that exist in other states, those are illegal in Wisconsin.
Well, I realize you need a state law.
Yeah, that would have to change.
But about half the states in the union now have that. That's an incredibly good incentive for an older house. Why should I improve it when I go down and get my assessment goes up because I've had to get my work permits right away? Why don't you give the person a minor TIF thing of an individual house?
It's certainly something worthy of discussion. There was, and I'll keep talking while Dan puts his mic back on. Gosh, I was down in spring break a few years ago down in Fairport, Alabama, and they had, it was based on some utopian principle from the 1890s. They only tax the land, and the whole idea is to create incentives for people to invest very deeply in their property, but the tax on the property, the underlying land is huge because there's absolutely no tax on the improvements. So it's another offshoot of what you're suggesting. It's not that it's bad, you just have to evaluate it and make sure it's being done. But right now that's not allowed in Wisconsin.
I understand that.
The principle of tax increment is along those lines, because but for the TIF you wouldn't do these improvements. It's really but for the tax maybe I would do the improvements. It would if you targeted areas, because if you just did it everywhere, then it wouldn't target areas that by policy you'd want to do improvements on. Right. So if you were going to do something like that, if you and I we'd have to have 3, so we'll have Cheryl in there too. If we could create a mini state legislature and create a law with incentives, first the law would have to get changed.
I understand that.
But I would think from a public policy standpoint, the best thing to do would be to use it for targeted neighborhoods, not just everywhere, because then you could hit an area like Near East or some of the other areas on the east side and say, look, if you invest in this area, we would waive the taxes on the improvements for 5 years. Yeah. Then people are going to say, okay, I pay taxes on improvements here but not there. You know what? I might go to this neighborhood. I might give it a shot. Yeah.
The laws I'm familiar with just have a year. A house over than 75 years in a house. They don't target communities. But I like the idea of targeting communities.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's a TIF for an individual house or an individual area.
An individual area, yeah. And right now you can't even do TIFs in residential areas, are limited in what you can do with TIFs. Right. So all we're doing is writing a new chapter, a new section in the statutes here, Dan.
I would think cities, the initial thing was, oh, we're going to lose revenue. But that's the same argument on the TIFs, is you are going to get more revenue once it's improved. So I think that's a weak argument. But
it's a but. You're really just introducing another but for element to it. But I would think that if you targeted the neighborhood, you could, and even if you rotate it, let's work on this neighborhood. Okay, we got something going in that neighborhood. Now it's sort of on its own 2 feet. Let's move to another neighborhood. And if you target neighborhoods, then you could really have an impact. It's certainly worthwhile. It's just that right now, as it exists, we don't have that capability. But let's.
I would think League of Cities would support that.
I wouldn't disagree with you. It's possible.
And we have a governor who wants less taxes, the new one.
Yeah.
So it seemed to me you can call him up, and then we'll meet again, and we'll get this right.
Let's get him on the line.
Okay, let's do that. Before we do that, though, you had mentioned our community development director, Alan Davis, of course, one of our new department heads this past year. I think he's doing a very good job. He's been on the show once. We would love to have him back again. I know he wants to come back, but he's so much more, I guess, consumer friendly. Is the word I'm looking for, than what we've experienced in the past, and he's open to new ideas, and he's just open in general with the public, and I like that. So how is he doing, and do we have all the other, he was just one of a few key positions that had to be filled. They're all filled now, correct?
All but one. We're still, the health department's in limbo. You'll probably get me on that later.
That's why I was holding up one finger here. So that's the only one that's outstanding still. Everything else is filled.
Yeah,
correct?
We have Robin Leslie is our new principal planner, doing a lot of work with Sustainability Board, as well as some other neighborhood improvement type of issues. So she's working on those issues. Our new chief building official, Kevin Ciabatti, we were able to steal him away from Rockford, who was having their own little issues in development. So as things were going down in Rockford, we were able to snatch him, and he's been very much focusing on a customer service oriented approach. And Alan, I've worked with Alan for 18 years now, so first as a contract consultant and then as a community development director. He very much embraces collaboration and working together to problem solve and help people achieve their goals, and he really views himself that way, and that was one of the reasons I was more than happy to have him join my team again. Sure.
And our Parks Director, Ray, he was new this past year also.
Ray's been engaging the community in so many different things. He's gotten so many of the recreation type organizations, the boat club, softball organizations and getting them engaged in discussing future issues. The council, you know, there was a big discussion about the boat docks and everything, but he made sure it's like, look, guys, we need you to be part of the solution, and part of the solution is maintaining these things. It's not just building it and just letting them just rest on your laurels and then they start withering. So they're having discussions about putting together, in fact, that you, it sounds like you're going to have Councilor Herman in here. He's been embracing that too, but getting the Otter Street Fishing Club and the Boat Club and the Yacht Club to say, look, what can we do long term to make sure that these facilities are maintained so that they, not only do they look great when they start, but they sustain themselves through the life of these facilities. So he's really doing a lot of community involvement. And then he's also doing an update to our park plan, which hasn't been done in years. And we, you know, you've probably heard things about we need to put a tower, an observation tower in Menominee Park and this and that. And Ray's just like, time out, let's talk about the vision, what we want to achieve in our parks. Everything else will flow from that. But first, let's get the park plan together. And the Parks Board is embracing that, and they're rolling up their sleeves, and they're just getting their hands dirty and talking about where we want the parks to be. Then all those answers come in. You know, do you want a skate park? Do you want this, or do you want that? I still hear things about dog parks. Throw it in the mix. You'll talk about it and strategize on how we can do those things. And then I'll figure out how we pay for it after that.
Well, speaking of parks, before we move on to something else, this was, what was this, the second year now that the Leach was under the umbrella of the Parks Department, being operated by it. Do you know offhand how it did in 2010? It
did okay, not great. Better than the first year we were running it.
Okay.
And it was, you know, Ray was just getting his feet wet with it, but he ran a similar type of facility, just not as big, in his previous community, so he was familiar with what it took. And again, it was getting the local groups in there. Even if it doesn't make money, it uses a facility. I was there, they had the Winnebago Land Barbershop Chorus and kids from Wisconsin. Well, the place was packed. It was all, you get people that are interested in going to the show, plus you get people who are interested in seeing the chorus because they're family members in the chorus, or their kid or their niece or nephews and kids from Wisconsin. And it's those little partnerships that you bring together. I mean, the chorus is obviously older folks. The kids from Wisconsin are younger folks, so we had young and old. It was just a wonderful community event, and Ray's grabbing onto those things. And he's continuing to partner. Irish Fest second year, it was rainy, but they survived their second year, and then they did the Oktoberfest, and Matt Miller gets a lot of credit for taking that risk to put that in there. And of course, Waterfest is an institution here in Oshkosh.
Well, either way, I mean, even if it didn't do as great as they may have liked, it's still doing much better than when PMI was running it. I mean, we can't even begin to compare the two, really, because it's like night and day, I think. Quality
of the programming is part of the equation. I can't say we're doing financially better, but we're not doing financially worse, and that's a good thing. So it's not costing us any additional money, but the quality is certainly much better than it was before.
Well, and I think the people too, at least the people I've talked to, they feel more like it's now like it's a city gift, you know, it's something that truly is for people in the city to use. Whereas before, I think with PMI, they kind of had this feeling like, well, you know, yeah, it was a gift to the people of the city, but the people of the city are kind of being shut out of the process. So
if it didn't make a lot of money for them, generally they weren't interested in doing it. And we still have to take a look at how the community benefits as a whole from it. And I think that philosophy change really helped. Council gets credit. They gave this staff a chance. Started with Tom Stefani, then after Tom retired, Bill Sturm in that interim kept it going, and then Ray's picked up where Bill and Tom left off. So it was a smooth transition, although I was nervous about it for a while. The transition went very well.
I'd like to go to a lightning round now. I want to ask.
You're going back to your original question.
No, those are gone. These are short questions, and I hope I get short answers.
Okay.
Okay, you like these. Status of Pioneer Inn. Any change?
No change in status. However, the mayor did ask to form a group of property owners to work on an implementation plan. We want to try to engage the owners of the Pioneer a little more into doing that. So hopefully that'll work.
Okay. Any progress on the City Center Hotel?
I wish I could tell you more. None. It's very disappointing.
Okay. King Cliff used car lot near Roxy. Is any plans to make that into a parking lot? Where's that gone?
Some folks have asked us about it. It really comes down to making sure that if we were going to do something, it would have to be cost effective. And right now, for us to do a parking lot on the like we did with 400 East, it would cost much more than people are originally thinking. So it's maybe limbo is the answer.
Okay. Last year at this time, we were all talking about deers. Why aren't we talking about deers in December of this year like we were? What happened?
Well, you remember the day after Christmas.
Oh, I do.
Last year,
I bet you do better than I do.
Controversial. But now the Urban Wildlife Committee has taken the issue on, and I think culling the herd did have an impact and it improved the conditions, but that will not sustain itself. That herd will grow back, and I'm hoping that the Urban Wildlife Committee will take the issue on and make some recommendations to the council. Frankly, I don't know where they've gone. They've been working on it, but I haven't been looking over their shoulder. It's a community effort, and let the community decide what they want to do. Okay.
Status of retention pond at West Haven, is that off the table?
Off the table for the golf course, yes, but
is.
We are working on negotiations to acquire a small parcel of approximately 5-6 acres to put a pond in there at an area that was not part of the official golf course.
Okay. Post office proposed consolidation with Green Bay. What can you report on any progress on fighting that?
We're still fighting. I see a ramrod happening personally.
Okay. Okay, can I keep going with it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm staying short with my answer.
Oh, I really appreciate it. I only have 3 pages. No, the Marion Road commercial development. Anything more happening there?
The apartments are going to open in the spring. Right now, the banks. And I would say if you talk about the Pioneer, you talk about City Center,
it's
and
the same thing.
The markets want to see 50% equity, and 5 years ago they were only requiring 15% equity. That's killing investment, and until things stabilize themselves and banks start evaluating people on their personal ability, their personal reputation, instead of a formula. The formula was too generous in the past, now it's too strict, and the markets have got to figure out a way to evaluate you on your ability to pay.
Okay. Now I've got to go to a longer question on my short question list. Why don't you just admit that commercial development is not going very well and residential development is going really good? Take Brian Barnes. Those 32 units between 8th and 9th on South Main are already filled. You got the Longfellow thing over between Oak and Grove, 16 units. He's got half of them built. I think they're all sold. Why don't you put residential development into the rest of the Marion Road development?
Residential development, number one, with a TIF, you can't do a lot of TIF with residential. It goes back to your earlier question. So that's the.
You guys are doing anything with TIF, though. I think you could slip that in.
But commercial generally generates more value per acre, and that generates generally commercial and industrial generate more tax dollars with less corresponding increase in services. So, although there was a recent seminar here that was talking about how great residential development was. It's great, but I think what Brian did, and I think what who did the one over on Kurt Kepler, I think they really nailed it well with the market, and that's where successful housing will go when people really just nail the market down very well. Brian, he did a great job on division.
Yeah, he did.
Good product, good quality, good management after the fact. That's what keeps these things going. And, down there on Oak with what Kurt did, it's close to the lake. It's
perfect.
It's perfect. People want something new, and they, some people don't want to invest in an older house. Some people do, but some people don't. But they love the lake. So I think Kurt just nailed it very well and hit a niche in the market.
Yeah.
Can I just add something to that? I think we should point out too that because it's right down there where the old Mercy Hospital used to be, and where there is an assisted living facility, I think some people have the idea that the apartments that are down there are apartments for seniors or some type of assisted living you know, extension or whatever, and that's not the case. I mean, anyone can get into these apartments. True?
Yeah, the ones that
The apartments on the, you're not talking about Kurt's, not the townhouses.
No, I'm talking about the other ones.
Yeah, it's the addition to Mercy. It's the one on the south end that's always been apartments for anybody.
Yeah,
right?
but there is a perception.
But there is. It's one building, and you think it's one building.
But from a marketing standpoint, they are trying to market to seniors who want to seamlessly transition from independent living to assisted to nursing.
And Affinity has a medical office on that side of which is incredibly convenient. So,
but there's nothing wrong with professionals wanting to young professionals who don't want to be tied down with all the maintenance responsibilities.
Right.
It's not a bad market.
So you're saying TIF districts really limit residential development?
Yeah, they do. We're really restricted in how much residential can be in any one TIF.
Yeah.
Because it's redevelopment, that's when you're doing a true redevelopment, a little more residential can go in, but that's a big TIF. So the stuff Brian's doing is our residential contribution to that. I'd love to see more of Brian Burns' stuff. He's done an outstanding job. He's worked very well with the city, and real happy with that.
He's a winner.
Yeah. It's
now, he wants that big Kimball building, the warehouse building on the corner of 9th and South Main. Is that the one he wants to make into units?
I think so. You got to get Alan in here to talk about that. I'm not familiar with all the details.
Okay. It's a huge white building.
Yeah.
It's a sore spot now. It looks awful. But I think the paper said that his next project was to go in and make like 16 apartments in that building.
And that's sort of that loft-looking
thing. It is,
thing,
absolutely.
That's attractive to a segment. You don't do a million of them.
No.
You do enough that people say, you know what, I want to check that out. And I've seen it done very well. Yeah. It's an attractive housing alternative for certain people, and it works great.
Mm-hmm.
One more question.
Sure.
What's the difference between a retention and a detention pond?
Now, you might get the engineers to tell you something different, but I'll make it real easy for you.
Okay, good.
Detention is short-term storage of the water. You fill it up, you empty it out within a certain amount of time. That's for stormwater quantity.
Okay.
Stormwater retention ponds are generally, they retain the water so that the water has enough time to get all the solids in it to settle down to the bottom, and then you clean the water in the process, so it's a water quality, generally. That's a very general statement, and the engineers will give you a bunch of exceptions, but that's it in a nutshell.
I like the roll-off definition. That's good. Go
Okay,
ahead.
well, on that subject, though, so what do we have then? We have detention ponds or we have retention ponds?
We have both. Because Oshkosh needs detention.
Right.
State law requires retention,
and
that's all the stormwater quality stuff that we're being mandated to do. But our priority right now is we have to deal with both. But Tippler Pond is a detention pond. That is meant for just flood control, because that area is in such need of
when you get a lot of water
control.
at one time, it goes into detention pond.
Yeah. But meanwhile, the one on James Road will be a combination. It'll be both water quality and water quantity. So it'll be a retention pond, but we're going to have a lot of stormwater quantity features to that, and hold back the water and give it enough time that the rest of the area can drain, and it holds it back for a long time and then slowly releases it out. So that'll do both.
I like that. Okay.
Well, and that leads me into my next question. What is I know a public meeting is being held, or has it just recently been held?
For James Road?
James Road.
We got $1 million community development block grant. By law, we were required to have a hearing, although we wanted to have a hearing anyway, so it just worked out convenient. But community development block grant, federal dollars require that you have a public input meeting. It was really just to say, here's what we're planning to do to take public input. Not a lot of people showed up to that because it doesn't directly impact people, but a lot of people are going to benefit from it. They just don't necessarily realize it yet. So that was required. We still have to go through the process of acquiring the land. We may or may not have to do it through condemnation. We're preparing as if we would have to do condemnation because we have to make sure that we keep that project on schedule. We really do need to get it done in 2011.
Were the farmers, there were a couple of farm families out there who showed up at council meetings this past year very upset about the potential of their land being taken and the likelihood, in fact, that their land's going to be taken. Did they show up at the public input meeting or public hearing, whatever you want to call it?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
I think it was pretty...
Do you still hear from them, or...?
Well, they've hired an attorney now,
Okay.
and so I suspect that they've been given instructions not to talk to us, and that's sometimes that happens. And yeah, frankly, I think sometimes that's even better because then it takes the emotion out of it.
Sure.
It's a business transaction. By law, we're required to give them fair market value. We can't try to lowball them or anything. And with the grant from the feds, that the stakes in the standards and mandates are even higher. So we have to follow the letter of the law on these things, and they'll get fair market value.
Okay. Someone else who had hired an attorney recently was at least one, possibly more, of the business people along Highway 21 and wanting to, not that the city could do anything about it, but they wanted the city to sort of support this resolution, if you will, that the state not close that section down while they're working on things, because that really will negatively, very seriously negatively impact some of those businesses along there, the car dealership in particular. Have you heard any more about what the DOT intends to do?
The DOT did send us a letter acknowledging the council's resolution, and they said to change it would lengthen the project and would actually make it worse impact on the business. Instead of one season, it would take multiple seasons to stage a project that way to keep that open to traffic. Engineers can do just about anything, but to do that, it would require massive changes to it. I think some of the folks out there believe that the state should not flip the freeway. That's already been designed that way, and those decisions were made back in 2002. So those wheels are in motion. I don't think it's any consolation to those folks because they are going to be negatively impacted. Anybody that believes otherwise is dreaming. But Witzel was impacted this past summer with that. 9th Avenue is going to be impacted in 2011, and the folks on 21 will be impacted in 2012. We need to be very aware of those things. We need to be very liberal in how we interpret sign laws so that it's very easy to get there. Think about the Two Brothers restaurant and the La Quinta Inn that's there. It's going to be very difficult because, number one, the people aren't going to be able to exit off the freeway to get there. So we need to make sure that when those folks are getting off 9th Avenue that they realize that you can still get to the La Quinta Inn, and we got to make it easy as possible for those folks.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just it. When Witzel was done or whatever, you had other ways that you could come at certain businesses. Here, they've got a lake on one side of them, and it really is very difficult to get to them. And so I think they've got probably a few more issues and hurdles that they have to deal with in this whole process.
Keller is, Keller needs to stay open for everybody on the east side, and Washburn needs to stay open for everybody on the west side, and that's why they're doing a lot of the work they're doing now. But yeah, it's going to take a lot of very clever marketing. The downtown businesses had the same challenge this year. For anybody who wanted to go to the east side, I think there were a lot of people who felt that, well, you can't get over to the east side of downtown. The library even acknowledged that they're now just seeing people return because there was this perception you couldn't even get to the library. Yeah. So even a city business got impacted. But we need to be very, very accommodating to every business out there so that if they want to put a sign somewhere over on 9th that says, my business on 21's open and here's the way, we ought to be able to let them put up like Burma Shave signs. Let them put up as many signs as they need so that people can get there. It's the least we can do to them for that short amount of time. And the world isn't going to end by throwing a few extra signs up close by. Well,
speaking of the DOT, roundabouts, we got our first taste of those this past year. I think a lot of people have kind of settled down and gotten used to the idea. There are still some, however, who are just adamantly opposed to these and just bad-mouthing them at every turn. Some pedestrians, you keep reading in the paper how there's a few pedestrians who are upset. My big problem with the roundabouts, and I realize you're not the chief of police, but I'm sure you've talked to him. People do speed through these things, Mark. They are not going 15. A lot of times they're not even going 20. And does the police department, have any intention of sitting at some of the more heavily traveled ones like Jackson and Murdoch and like the ones at Witzel and watching these folks and trying to at least get people to slow down?
The chief has actually issued a lot of citations out there. Their observations, I think, that are Jackson and Murdoch's worse. I'm not sure why, but just from their observations, Jackson and Murdoch's worse.
I think it's just a heavier traveled intersection.
I guess. I travel the Witzel one on my way home, and I don't see it as bad. If anything, sometimes I think people are almost too cautious, and I don't necessarily, even though I don't travel Jackson Murdoch as much, sometimes I don't see people paying as much attention, and I don't know what it is. It's just, they just don't, and I'm not sure if there's too many distractions because there's things closer to the street, but all you got to do is look left, and we've done PSAs, but the police are still out there. They will continue to be out there this week with snow that we've had recently, because it's been, it's slippery out there, and people, even 15 is a challenge. So they're still out there. Pedestrians, we're still looking at different things we can do. Some people suggested moving the pedestrian crossings farther away. The traffic engineers have said, well, the people leaving the roundabout will be building up a head of steam. That may not be a thing, but we may want to do things as far as taking advantage of those solar-powered flashers and things like that. Those are the things that I think we want to take a look at to get people to pay attention to the road rather than, oh, there's a chalupa on sale at Taco Bell, and we really need to get people focused on that. But Jackson and Murdoch is worse for whatever reason. Very little. There's still one up there at Furnow and Algoma that has not had it's not been an issue, and I'm not sure why, but
I don't think that's nearly as heavily traveled as some of the other places
I guess,
are.
But it's not. I haven't heard complaints about that. But Jackson Murdoch is still one of those that we've got to just keep an eye on. But police are out there.
Yeah, and I mean, people, they need to look to the left for oncoming traffic, but they still kind of need to look to the right for pedestrians. I almost saw a guy in a wheelchair get hit trying to cross the one by Pick and Save. I was in the the outermost lane. I stopped for a guy in a wheelchair because you could see he was trying to cross, and as he got just about to the driver's side corner of my car, this guy in a big black pickup truck comes barreling through, never looked to see if they were pedestrians, didn't bother to wonder in his own mind why I was stopped, looked to see if there was no vehicle coming, and there wasn't, so he barreled on through and almost took out the guy in the wheelchair. That was it was scary to see. I'm sure it was scary for the guy in the wheelchair and just very dangerous. But I don't see that many pedestrians out there. But this was a bad situation, and I just don't think people are watching for people crossing.
That's where I think we want to take a look at flashers and things like that to at least get people to be aware that pedestrians are out there. And it doesn't matter if it's a roundabout or a stop sign or a school crossing. You're supposed to stop, and the police are aware of those, and they've issued plenty of citations out there, so we're just going to have to keep it up.
Okay. Can we talk about city roads and the snow?
We could. I have one green question first. Can I ask that? Can you tell a little bit about the hybrid buses, how they break down, cost effective or more expensive?
Well, when you get 100% of them, when they get 100% funded, they're great.
Were these 100% funded?
Yeah, these were all stimulus dollars. There may have been like 27,000 we had to come up with for 4 buses, so it was virtually free.
But it's still taxpayers' money.
Yeah, it's still taxpayers' money. But when we're taking a look at it from our standpoint, it's a little right now with the federal formula under normal circumstances, 80% federally funded. When it's that way, they still pay for themselves from our very narrow standpoint. But it depends on how you analyze it. From my business model, when you fall below 80% funding, it's going to be tough for them to pay for themselves. That's when the folks who are good advocates of the environmental movement, their job is to put the indirect cost on the environment to demonstrate where that is, and usually the debate comes down to how much value to put on carbon dioxide that does not go into the atmosphere. If you assign $50 a ton or $20 a ton, that economic analysis changes whether it pays for itself or not. But that doesn't end up in the city's coffers, so I have to take a very narrow view of it. In the council, if they want us to take a wider view of it, we certainly can, but it will cost more money up front from the city, but once it falls below that 80-20, it's tougher to justify.
But it's safe to say that green does cost more.
Oh yeah, they cost more.
Okay.
Now,
up front, sure. Yeah.
Up front, but you know, to me it's like computers, and you know, I remember calculator I got in high school was $69. You can get it for, you know, $2, or they hand them out for free nowadays. Sure. So I think as the technology improves, that'll happen. A few years ago, one of the big environmental pushes recently with stormwater has been zero phosphate fertilizer. And you used to have to pay twice as much for that fertilizer as opposed to the one that had phosphorus in it. Now that the market's developed, the price is almost the same now. You can go to Fleet Farm or Shopko or Kits and File and almost pay the same price for the zero phosphorus as you did because the market's there. Sure. So I think as the market grows for hybrid buses, the technology, it's the economies of producing these things. And if you're only producing, you know, a handful of them, the cost per unit is way up. Sure. So we'll see where it goes.
Thank you.
Okay. Buses drive down roads, and so do cars.
I thought that was
it was a great segue.
Right,
we have had our first major snowfall of the season, and you know, people are always going to complain about the way the roads are being plowed or not being plowed. Can you just kind of recap for us, Mr. City Manager, what the policy is on how the roads get plowed? And the reason I ask that is because there are still some major arterials, even as we tape tonight, 5 days after the storm, you know, that they're cleared somewhat, but clearly you do not have two complete lanes on each side of the road. So, you know, how does that process happen? What's the protocol for clearing roads?
It's probably more a protocol than it is a policy, because the policy is that our goal is to have, you know, bare pavement streets on our major arterials and collectors. That is not the policy for residential areas. In fact, the only times we salt in residential areas is on curves and intersections. So that's one thing that we've done as a matter of policy. I would love to not have that policy, but it's not an issue of the council not wanting to do it either. It's been a function of finances over the years and as we cut back. The other thing that I've discovered on that issue, as I've really been looking at it, our salt storage capacity is not very good. And we're in the process of working on a new public works garage. We still have to figure out where it's ultimately going to be, but once we get that location, I don't even want to wait for the garage itself. I want to build another salt storage shed, because somebody called me the other day and said, well, you can buy salt anytime. And no, this isn't like going down to Kits and File and picking up a bag. We have to pull out a crystal ball every August and determine how much salt we want. But the reality is we can only get as much salt as our sheds fill. And if we guess right, and we know that we're going to be half full in January when the delivery comes, we get it filled to the top. The goal is to always try to have it filled, but if it's a bad winter, in this recent storm, as dissatisfied as you are with the results, as you have every right to be. I
didn't say I was so dissatisfied.
Well, you should be.
Some of the streets are not cleared.
But they're not
very
good,
well.
and I'll get to that in a second. But even there, we used a lot of salt, and we're going to get refilled in January, but we will likely not be refilled to the top because we ordered only so much back in August, and we can't buy more. Sometimes you can do some horse trading with somebody who may have ordered too much, but you're like a commodities broker, and it's a very difficult thing. As far as the dissatisfaction, a lot of it is on a storm-by-storm basis. And one of the things we discovered was that you know, on that Saturday, when it started the temperature went up before it went down, it started to freeze. The street started to freeze, and the minute it started to freeze, the snow stuck a lot harder. And that, when you're doing the sides of the roads, and I've driven plenty, Jackson, Witzel, Murdoch, the blades, the front blades on a truck are the ones that hit the ground and they're really hard pushing it up. The ones on the side float, and so they bounce very easily. So when you've got a lot of snow, it bounces a lot and misses a lot, and that's a challenge. So you're seeing a lot of that because the wing blades just don't do as effective a job. Right now, our goal as of December 16th is to get the snow that's out there cleaned up then we'll go back doing some more plowing. But the reality is we got to get the snow out of there, because if Mother Nature decides to dump on us again, we need to have a place to hide that snow.
Sure.
So those are the things we're working on.
Well, you are our last guest. This is the last show that will air in 2010. So it's kind of an honor for you. It's an honor for us as well. But, you know, kind of give us, in our remaining minutes here, Mark, you know, some of the high points and low points of this year, and what can we look forward to in 2011?
I would say probably one of the biggest things that I'm very proud of is the fact that we had our first strategic plan adopted. A lot of things flow from that. I mean, we can talk about infrastructure, and we can talk about strong neighborhoods, and we can talk about those types of things, but that's a roadmap for the future. And so that it lays such good groundwork that with minor tweaks we can keep going. So that's a positive one. I think you hit some of the low points. I think some of the things with City Center Hotel I'm very disappointed about. And when you have a great convention center and a great renovated Main Street, and not to have a hotel that anchors it, and it's inconsistent with the wonderful investments we've done downtown, and that's a disappointment that I'm still going to keep working on. Okay. So there's the high and the low. Okay.
And what can we look forward to in the new year?
Well, a lot of the implementation of the strategic plan stuff, the strong neighborhoods thing, continuing team policing, and marrying those two together, and getting citizens more engaged. Council asked me, when they did my review, they were very happy with what we did with the state of the city and how we got more public input. And they actually asked me to take that type of approach on the road. And they would like me to do quarterly types of meetings, and not just at the convention center or at City Hall, but at various places around the community. So I'm conjuring up how I want to do that, but I thought it was a great suggestion, and you give them something they like and they want more of it, that's okay. We can do that. And part of the state of the city that was so successful was citizen engagement, and we had fun with it. People complained about streets, and I didn't hide behind it. I said, yep, we got some ugly streets and we got to work on them. and we worked on it, and we've made progress this year, and progress was meant a lot of detours in that, but we made progress, and you're going to see more stormwater, more streets as well. So we're going to keep plugging away.
Okay, all right. And hopefully our budget problems will continue to go away. They'll continue, but hopefully they'll become less and less, but I don't know. So anyway, Mark, it's always a real pleasure, and thank you very much for being here. We enjoy having you, and we look forward to you coming back many times in 2011.
Absolutely.
So, doesn't get a Christmas gift?
Christmas is over by the time this airs. Anyway, thanks so much. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And that's going to do it for us, and not just for this, but for the entire year of 2010. So have a happy New Year, and we will see you again in 2011. Until then, keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.